Good afternoon, everyone. Today I will be presenting a seminar on Kurt Schneider's first rank symptoms of schizophrenia. Introduction. So, Kurt Schneider was a German psychiatrist who was largely known for his writing on the diagnosis and understanding of schizophrenia, as well as personality disorders, then known as psychopathic personalities. An interesting fact about Kurt Schneider was that he was one of the very few scientists and psychiatrists at that time who refused to work for the Nazi party. And because of which, after the abolition of the Nazi party, when the new German government came in, they decided to not take anybody who had affiliations with the previous Nazi party, and because of which Kurt Schneider was uh, appointed the position of the dean of the psychiatric facility of Germany, and that's how Kurt Schneider also got a lot of opportunities. So it in the backdrop also tells us that sometimes taking a stand is also important. At that time, though he was highly disregarded by the Nazi party and publicly shamed for it, but once all of that was abolished, he came into the forefront of psychiatric research. At that time, Schneider accepted Kremlin's system of classification and distinguished between abnormal personalities, abnormal reactions, or organic psychosis, schizophrenia, and cyclothymia. This was something that Emil Kraepelin had already devised, which uh, Schneider accepted and then later on worked on it. He had taken a group of psychotic patients, excluded those with clear organic psychosis, reactive psychosis, obvious cyclothymia, and then performed a statistical analysis of the symptoms on the remaining psychotic patients who were presumed to have schizophrenia. In those patients, he termed the most frequently found symptoms as first rank symptoms. So, what do first rank symptoms mean? When Schneider tried to find out what are the symptoms which are the most predominant in schizophrenia, he found out that there were 11 certain symptoms which he found out to be repeated in a larger cohort, and which he termed out to be the first rank symptoms of schizophrenia. Now let's look at the list of first rank symptoms. Though he did not distinguish them in these sections, for the ease of understanding and for the ease of learning, they can be divided into four certain blocks. You can have the thought block, wherein you have thought insertion, thought withdrawal, and thought broadcast. You can have the made block, wherein you include made affect, made action slash volition, and made impulse. You can have the perception block, which is basically perception auditory hallucinations. The auditory hallucination can be first person auditory hallucination, second person, third person, and in the other section you can have somatic passivity and delusional perception. So you can basically make four blocks, three of three, and then rest of the others as two. So this is easy for understanding. Now let's go through each individual first rank symptom. Thought insertion: experiences of thoughts that do not have the feeling of familiarity, of being his own, but he feels that they have been put in his mind without his volition from outside himself. What does this actually mean? The person has a certain amount of thought. The person might take agency of the thought, that the thought is arising from his mind, but he says that the thought has been put into his mind by someone else. Example is, a 29-year-old housewife said, I look out of the window and I think the garden looks nice and the grass looks cool, but the thought of Emin Andrews comes into my mind. There are no other thoughts there, only his. He treats my mind like a screen and flashes his thoughts onto it, and as you flash a picture. So this patient is basically saying that her mind is a certain space, wherein this guy Andrews is using her mind to flash his thoughts. Means that in the space of her mind, Andrews has inserted his thoughts into it and is basically using her mind space as a way of putting his thoughts into it. Ownership versus agency. Now to better understand thought insertion, we have to look at certain called as ownership versus agency. One still experiences oneself as the owner of an inserted thought, but attributes it to another agency. What does this mean? That the person believes that the thought has come from his thing, but has been inserted by someone else into his mind. So you might say that you have an auditory hallucination. You will go out to say that the auditory hallucination has come from outside. You do not take the agency of the auditory hallucination. You say कि ये कहीं से तो भी बाहर से मेरे दिमाग में आया है या मुझे सुनाई दे रहा है. But in thought insertion, the thought has come into your mind, but the thought has been inserted by someone else. Now, the first two lines on the normal experience, we experience ourselves as the owner of our thoughts. They arise within the boundaries of our subjectivity. We also experience ourselves as the agents of our thoughts, that we think them. The inserted thought is experienced as produced by another agency, one that uses one's mind as a medium to think. So one owns the thought, but is not the agent behind it. Clear? Thought withdrawal. In thought withdrawal, it is believed by the patient that his thoughts are in some way been taken out of his mind. He has some feeling of loss resulted from this process. It may be coupled with other thought passivity experiences. Basic simple understanding that the thought has been withdrawn from it. The thoughts are the patient's own and they have been withdrawn from an outside agency. A 22-year-old woman said, I am thinking about my mother and suddenly my thoughts are sucked out of my mind by a vacuum extractor and there is nothing in my mind. It is empty. The thought has been withdrawn. Thought broadcasting. The patient experiences his thoughts withdrawn from his mind and then in some way made public and projected over a wide area. The explanation he gives for this can occur will, as usual, for the content of a delusion, depend on his background, on his cultural background and predominant interest. Now, thought broadcasting can be in various forms. The patient can say that I am watching the news and the news anchor is saying whatever I'm thinking about, whatever my thoughts are. The patient might be reading a newspaper and be saying that my thoughts have been broadcasted to a larger public using newspaper as the medium. So it's not just कि someone is able to understand and read your thoughts. The thought can be broadcasted in various other forms. A 21-year-old student said, as I think, my thoughts leave my head on a type of mental ticker tape. Everyone around has to pass the tape through their mind and they know my thoughts. So he's saying that there's a basic tape. On the tape, his thoughts are there and his thoughts have come out of his head into the universe in the form of the tape. And that tape is passing through everyone's mind and everyone is able to read his thoughts as the tape is passing through their mind. So that is thought broadcasting. Made volition, made to do something. Passivity of volition, the patient feels that it is not his will that has carried out the action. A 29-year-old shorthand typist described her actions as follows. When I reach my hand for the comb, it is my hand and arm which move and my fingers that pick up the pen, but I don't control them. I sit there wanting them to move and they are quite independent. What they do is nothing to do with me. I am just a puppet who is manipulated by the cosmic strings. When the strings are pulled, my body moves and I can't prevent it. She says this to an audience. Basically, she's saying that her actions are being controlled by someone else. This has to be distinguished from alien hand syndrome, wherein it's just one hand which is moving and performing a certain action. In this, any part of the body can move and the patient will say that my body has been controlled by someone else. He or she has given an example of cosmic strings, but it can be in various forms. Made affect. The affect has been made. Passivity of emotions occurs when the affect that the patient experiences does not seem to be him or to be his own. He believes that he has been made to feel it. That means whatever emotions he has and whatever he is feeling, he's saying that these emotions, these feelings, whatever I am going through is not something that I want to feel. This has been made by someone else. Someone else has made me to feel all of these emotions. A 23-year-old female patient reported, I cry, tears roll down my cheeks and I look unhappy. but inside I have a cold anger because they are using me in this way, and this is not me who is unhappy, but they are projecting unhappiness onto my brain. They project upon me laughter for no reason, and you have no idea how terrible it is to laugh and look happy and know it is not your but their reaction. So your affect has been made by some outside agency. Made impulse. The impulse has been made by someone else. The patient experiences a drive which he feels is alien to carry out some motor activity. The impulse may be experienced without the subject carrying out the behavior. The action is admitted to be the patient's own, but he feels that the impulse that precipitated him into doing it was not his own. Now we initially saw that the volition was made by someone else, as in the action was controlled by someone else, and the patient was made to do something by someone else. Here the patient is saying that the motor activity of performing the action is done by him, but the impulse which resulted into the motor activity has come from somewhere outside, which means that the impulse to perform the action has come from somewhere else, but the action has been performed by him. A 26-year-old engineer emptied the contents of a urine bottle over the ward dinner trolley. He said, "The sudden impulse came over me and I must do it. It was not my feeling, it came into me from the X-ray department. And that was why I was sent there for implants yesterday. It was nothing to do with me. They wanted it done. So I picked up the bottle and poured it in. It seemed all I could do." So here we can see that he's agreeing that the motor activity has been performed by him, but the impulse behind the motor activity did not arise from his own mind or from his own made, from his own impulse. Whereas in the made volition, the action was performed by someone else. Now the third block, auditory hallucination. First person auditory hallucination. Audible thoughts is the patient's experience of hearing his own thoughts said out aloud. The patient may hear people repeating his thoughts out loud just after he has thought about them, answering his thoughts, talking about them, and having said them audibly or saying aloud what he is about to think, so that his thoughts repeat his voices. A 35-year-old patient heard a quiet voice with an Oxford accent, which he attributed to the BBC. The volume was slightly lower than that of normal conversation and could be heard equally well with either ear. He could locate its source at the right mastoid process. The voice would say, "I cannot stand that man. The way he holds his hand, he looks like a poof." So it is coming from his own thoughts, which are said out aloud. In second person auditory hallucination, an example is the voices are arguing. Voices heard arguing with each other implies two or more hallucinatory voices quarreling or discussing with each other. Oftentimes, the patient says that I can hear two voices discussing about me with each other. The patient usually features in the third person in the content of these arguing voices. A 24-year-old male patient reported hearing voices coming from the nurse's office. One voice, deep in pitch and roughly spoken, repeatedly said, "GT is a bloody paradox." And another, higher in pitch, said, "He is that, he should be locked up." A female voice occasionally interrupted, saying, "He is not, he is a lovely man." So these are voices which are discussing the patient among themselves. So that becomes second person auditory hallucination. Third person voices commenting, hallucinatory voices giving a running commentary on the patient's activities occur and are of first rank. The time sequence of the commentary may be such that it takes place just before, during, or after the patient's activities. The patient does not know that his particular perception is unique, that other people do not share his perceptual experiences. The abnormal thing about voices commenting is that they should be experienced as perceptions and as coming from outside the self. There is a very famous Hollywood movie called as Once Upon a Time, wherein the main character starts hearing running commentary about whatever he is doing. So in that movie, it's basically an author who's writing a story, and the characters could hear the author narrating everything that they are doing. So with respect to the characters, what they are having is a third person auditory hallucination, because they are hearing running commentary of whatever they are doing, whatever they are going to feel, however they are going to interact, and whatever is supposed to happen. So in that movie, you could see all the three: narration about just before what is happening, narration during the activity is happening, and narration after the activities happened. An example is a 41-year-old housewife heard a voice coming from the house across the road. The voice went on incessantly in a flat monotone, describing everything she was doing with an admixture of critical comments. She is peeling potatoes, get hold of the peeler. She does not want that potato. She is putting it back because she thinks it has a knobble like a penis. She has a dirty mind. She is peeling potatoes, and now she is washing them. So a lot of running commentary is oftentimes derogatory in nature. That look at the patient, he is not able to even do it. He's doing this just because he wants to get rid of something. The last block, other block, somatic passivity. Somatic passivity is the belief that outside influences are playing on the body. It is not the same as haptic hallucinations, but it is a delusional belief that the body is being influenced from outside the self. May occur in association with various somatic hallucinations. The event is experienced as alien by the patient, in that it is not experienced by the patient as his own, but inserted into the self from outside. An example is a 38-year-old man had jumped from a bedroom window, injuring his right knee, which was very painful. He described his physical experience as the sun rays are directed by the US Army satellites in an intense beam, which I feel entering the center of my knee and then radiating outside, causing the pain. Delusional perception. The only type of delusion that is regarded as a first rank is delusional perception. A normal perception delusionally interpreted and regarded as being highly significant to the patient. So normal perception, the interpretation of the perception is at a delusional level and regarded as being highly significant to the patient. A woman said, every night blood is being injected out of my arms. When asked for her evidence, she explained that she had little brown spots on her arms and therefore knew that she was being injected. The interviewer looked at the spots on her arms, rolled up his sleeve, and showed her spots identical in appearance on his own arms. He said that they had been on his arms as long as he could remember and were called as freckles. She agreed that both sets of spots looked similar and accepted his explanation of his own spots, but still insisted that her freckles proved that she was being injected in her sleep. So this is basically perceiving a normal perception and interpreting it on a delusional level and giving excessive importance to that certain perception. Summary. In summary, I would like to say that the first rank symptoms are something that has been commonly seen in patients of schizophrenia. Currently, we have other points which have taken more significance than the ones given over here. But the 11 first rank symptoms have always been in handy in trying to study and understand and explain schizophrenia much better. Thank you.